Today, I'm going to teach you how to do more in 4 weeks than most people do in 4 years. I know this because I built and sold 3 businesses by the age of 28, leading to a $100 million net worth. And now, by the age of 32, I have a portfolio valued at over $500 million. And I use these exact principles to scale fast. You become a multiplier. And the way to become a multiplier is to learn how to get other people to do things for you. Most people actually don't know how to delegate. It's really how much do you delegate and how do you decide on how much you delegate. Most people lean towards one end of the spectrum or another. Either you do everything yourself or you abdicate responsibility and everyone else does everything. When I was running Gym Launch, I had brought in somebody as a leader of a department, and that person was over 3-4 very important departments. That person was very smart, very competent. However, he held on so tightly to everything. And I think he felt anxious handing things off. He was always worried that people weren't gonna do it like he could. And when he did hand things off, he didn't give them the proper resources, and then what he was fearful of would actually happen, which is that they didn't do it as well as he wanted it to be done. He felt like that was a poor reflection on himself. What I noticed is that his departments all moved very slowly. And so as I see that revenue is stagnating, I thought to myself, the problem is probably this person. Generally, how I rate a manager is if I put them over a department, does it get better or worse, objectively? And what was happening is they were all going in the wrong direction. So what happened was I had a meeting with this guy, and I was like, listen, I've looked at everything that you're doing, I've looked at everything your team's doing, and what I'm recognizing is that you're not delegating anything. You're trying to do everything, and you are a bottleneck for your team. I realized he wasn't the best fit for the team because he looked at me and he said, well, I can't give them anything because they're all stupid. And I was like, well, if you are the one who hired all these people, then what does that mean about you, right? But the reason that none of his delegation had been successful was because when he did delegate, he didn't properly train people. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. A lot of the times what happens is that when you yourself are incredibly capable, you are a high-level individual contributor, the better you are at doing work, the harder it feels to delegate because the bigger the gap. And so what it means is that you have to do more training, and often you have to delegate to more than one person. For example, if I wanted to delegate my entire job, it is very unlikely that I'm going to find somebody that's going to take my whole job from me. Right? I'm probably going to find multiple people, train them up, watch them over time, and it's going to be a slow, painful process. And this is why it's so hard for people who are so good at something to delegate as much as it is for people who aren't as good at something, because it feels like it's so much harder and it takes so much longer. But what happens is that then you keep your team small, you can't grow the business, and ultimately you end up with a job rather than a company. When something is new, when you're trying something new, or when you have a new person, it makes sense to hold on tight. Nobody is going to be able to birth something out of thin air better than the founder themselves. That makes a ton of sense. But at some point, what you will recognize is that the bottleneck to your growth is not you doing more of the thing, it's the fact that you don't know how to get more of the thing off your plate. And so what happens is those people that lean too far in this direction, they hold on to everything. What they often do is they delegate tasks rather than authority. If you delegate tasks, you create followers. If you delegate authority, you create leaders. The reason for that is because you're essentially delegating the doing versus the thinking. In the beginning, that works well because it's like, okay, I don't need people to be making decisions and critically thinking. I need people to be my hands. But at some point, you cannot add any more hands. And then what you find is that all day, every day, you're just delegating tasks for people who you have trained not to think things through. What I had to realize over time as I was growing my own business is that you can either have growth or you can have control. It is very difficult to have both. And so what you do is you give up control and you trade it for growth in order to build your company. When you delegate and start to empower new leaders, what happens a lot is that it feels like you take 2 steps back to take 10 steps forward. Delegation in the beginning takes more time and more work, but long term, it pays off more than if you do it yourself right then. On the other end of the spectrum, we have leaders who do nothing and delegate everything. One of my portfolio company CEOs is what I would say a perpetual abdicator. What that means is that you disregard, give something away and take no responsibility for it. And so what happened was I thought they were doing a fantastic job overseeing the marketing and sales department, but immediately what that person did is wanting to bring in a professional manager, which I totally support. I'm like, yes, let's bring in professional managers. But what they missed, he didn't talk to them, he didn't give them feedback, and he just said, well, because you're a marketing sales professional, I brought you in, do your work. That's not how it works either. You see, some people are highly uncomfortable doing things, like being in the mess of things. The thing about a leader who abdicates responsibility is that they tend to overhire and they tend to not have a company that functions super well because nobody knows what good looks like, because nobody set the ground rules for what good is. There's a lot of people who just delegate sooner because they're stressed, because they're uncomfortable, because they think this is what I'm supposed to do. Business is fucking hard. And if you want to hand something off and have it done well, you have to learn how to properly delegate. I look at it as the goal of somebody in leadership is really to spend 80% of their time doing only what they can do and only what they can best do. And then 20% of their time is gonna be spent firefighting and doing shit that doesn't matter. So I'll give you an example of where I spend my time, right? What's my 80%? 80% of my time, business growth strategy, building culture, marketing, content. Now, what's the 20% of my time that I spend filling in the gaps or doing jobs that I don't have yet hired? I would say diagnosing operational limitations, prepping meetings, legal bullshit, resolving portfolio company issues. Those are all things that I don't think are the 80%, but they are there because there's not anybody else to do them right now. And so I am still doing those things. And that's the reality of a growing business, is that you're always doing part of somebody's job if things are growing quickly. A lot of people, what they do is they don't delegate, they abdicate. If you don't ever do the thing or teach your team to do the thing, then you cannot empower them to do it right. You are confusing them, not helping them. Delegation is not the same as abdication. A phrase that I like to use is that you want to be nose in, hands off. You want to know where all the bodies are buried, but that doesn't mean you're the one digging them up every day. Delegation without clarity and without an example of what good looks like just causes confusion. And so the managers that are all the way over here, where they're abdicating, they're not giving any instruction, not hands-on at all, what they do is they often leave people confused because it's vague direction that they've given them and people don't know what to do. And so they are actually really low production, because when people don't have clarity of what good looks like, then they don't move as quickly. So what that brings me to is the 4 zones of delegation. I have seen all sorts of delegation frameworks, and I use this one because it's what helps me visually to figure out, how do I delegate, what do I delegate, and to what degree do I delegate something. Zone 1 is called done or deleted, something of low importance and requires low competency to do. I'll give you some examples of things that are not that important and don't take a lot of intelligence to do. Buying new office chairs for my conference room, asking somebody to take out the trash. Would I prefer that they're done correctly? Yes, of course I would prefer they're done correctly. But they are not the most important things for me to be focused on, and they also don't require a significant level of intelligence to do. So this is where you delegate things that are not that important and don't require a ton of competency to do. So usually if you have people who are of lesser experience, this is where you would give them zone 1 things, done or deleted. These are things where you don't involve yourself in, right? So what I mean is that you delegate these things, you give these things to people, and you do not give a ton of training and you don't give a ton of context, because they're not that important if they're not done perfectly, and they don't require a ton of skill to do generally well. Some things are not worth taking the time to train someone thoroughly on because they might not be important to you or to your mission of your business, which is why I call this done or deleted, because either you give it to someone to get it done, or the alternative is that maybe you say, fuck it, delete it. And I am a big fan of, when I have things I want to delegate, is this the constraint right now for my business, for myself, for my day? And sometimes I just let shit burn. There are so many fires that occur in a business. I ask myself this question, which is this a living room fire, like the whole fucking living room's on fire? Is this a curtain fire, like the curtains to the living room are on fire? Or is it a trash can fire, which is like, it's burning, it sucks, but it's contained itself and it will put itself out eventually. And if it's a trash can fire, I would say that's what I consider something you put in done or deleted, which is it could burn and it can put itself out, or I could just leave it and walk out the house and it'll be fine. The second zone is what I call informed progress, things that are of high importance, but they actually require low skills or low competency to complete. So an example of this would be, is something as simple as a sales script. There's a lot of people that could have the skill to write the sales script. Why is that important, and why is that something that I would want to be looped in on so that I could give them feedback? Because that is the first conversation that anybody has with a customer. And I take it seriously. I think it's the first impression of our entire business, and it can set somebody up for success or for failure as a customer of our business based on how it's scripted. And so that's where we bring in informed progress. This is where a leader will give these tasks to a teammate with the understanding that that teammate's going to give them visibility and regular updates into the task, because the leader wants to constantly be giving them feedback so that when we get to the decision point or the end of the project, it's not all done incorrectly. Because the worst thing that could happen is you give someone a task or project that is very hard to reverse, and they get all the way to the end, and you say, oh my God, we have to rebuild the whole thing. If I don't know what the sales script says, then maybe 3 months down the line, I'm like, what's going on? All these people are complaining, they're saying all this shit, there's all this stuff breaking on the back end, and now I've got this big mess I've got to clean up that's hard to reverse. Most people think, you know what, I hired all these people to do this shit. They should be taking care of it, right? Right, but those people don't know what the rest of the business looks like. If you're the founder, if you're the CEO, you're the head generalist. You know how everything ties together, and you know all the second order consequences of every single department. So when something is important to the business, but doesn't require high skill, we want to continue getting feedback from people so we can give them yes, no, maybe, and help reroute them and give them feedback to get on track. The third zone is informed results. Something not that important, but actually requires a lot of skill to do. Doing our P&L statement each month. Now you would be like, Leila, I think doing the P&L is very important. I would say that making sure that we make money is important, but how you structure the P&L is probably a little bit less so to me. Every single email that our CS reps send out, those are not important enough for me to continue checking on, but they're important enough that I am monitoring the results. As long as it's not terrible, it's gonna be fine. And even if it wasn't done correctly, it's not gonna not move the needle for the business. Even the setup for this video right now, I just am gonna see the results of that. I don't need to check in every time that Jason is setting up the cameras and the lighting, because in my opinion, what's gonna move the needle the most for the business as a whole is not this thing. What you have to understand is that you only have so much attention. You want to be doing informed progress, being in the loop of the things that move the needle the most for the business. And then for the other things that are not going to, if done wrong, impact the business greatly, then those things we don't need to be kept in the loop of. Instead, we just see the results. And so we just ask people to give us the results once they are done. For our P&L, give me the summary of all the numbers. For all the emails that are sent out by CS, give me a report at the end of the week. Let me know how the video does when it performs. And so these are things that I would rather look at the results and then adjust going forward. It's not important enough that you need to fix it before it ships. But once it ships and you see the result, then you can say, okay, I'm gonna give you feedback for next time. The fourth zone is the don't delegate zone. And something very important and requires a very high level of competency. This is often when it's your job. These are things that are very hard to reverse, require someone with a ton of expertise, and greatly impact the business. These are things that we don't delegate. Company strategy, when we buy a business, hiring an executive, signing any legal agreement. I'll give you an example, which is when we started acquisition.com, I thought to myself that I could hire people to do some of these irreversible things on my behalf, and that I didn't need to be as nose in, hands out on some of these things, and I could just be nose out, hands out. And so we actually did a business acquisition where I let somebody on my team lead the entire thing, and I just signed the contract afterwards. And it was probably the worst mistake I could have ever made. The terms were wrong. There were things in the contract that I committed to that I would have never committed to. And guess what? Can't reverse that shit. So I learned the hard way that there are things in the business that you don't want to delegate. If you're the type of leader that wants to empower your team, this is usually one of the hardest things to understand. But it is very important because there is professional manager mode and there's founder mode. And if you're the founder, you know how to do things better than a professional manager. Even if they come in with all these skills and all this experience, you built it so you know how to break it. They didn't build it, so they don't know how it breaks. And this is something that a lot of people don't grasp, and they think that to get to the level that they see myself or other people with 9-figure businesses, that somehow we know less about the business. I know just as much about the business, if not more, as the business grows. And you just learn how to contain all of that and not explode. These are the things that you do not delegate. And this is what your job becomes, the things that are high importance and not easy to reverse. Those are the things the CEO or founder does. And that is what should make up the 80% of your time that you don't delegate to other people. I think the issue is that a lot of people feel guilty. They're like, well, I want to give this person a shot. You know the best way to teach your team is to demonstrate what good decision making looks like. And then after they've seen you do it enough times for months or years, maybe you bring them into those conversations. They can help put together the strategy. They can help execute an acquisition. But those things take a lot longer to hand off than a lot of people wish they did. There's some things that you just don't delegate, and that is the job of the founder. And so if we bring this all together, what I want to show you guys is what this framework looks like and how you can apply it. We've got on the horizontal axis, importance. We've got on the vertical axis, competency. And then you will see where we've got done or deleted, we've got informed results, we've got informed progress, and we've got you do it your fucking self. So how can you apply this today? Intelligence is the speed of learning. If you watch this video and you do nothing with it, then that means you did not learn. And that's why I want to put these steps together for you. Take this framework, write it down right now. And here's what I want you to do. Pull up all your tasks from either this last week or this upcoming week. If you want to be crazy, you can go through the tasks of the last 4. You can make it a month. And I want you to take those tasks and I want to put each task into one part of the quadrant. Once you have them under all different parts of the quadrant, every part of the quadrant that is not you do it your fucking self, you put someone's name next to it. Because what I want you to see is all the things that you're doing that you could delegate to somebody. And all the things that maybe you delegated and they're not going well because what you've realized now is they should have been under you. So here's what I want you to do. Use this quadrant, apply it for this upcoming week, and then what I want you to do is come back, leave me a comment, and let me know how it helped you.